Welcome to One Chapter, One Thought. I'm Pastor Chris from Lincroft Bible Church in New Jersey, and every weekday I read one chapter of the Bible and offer one brief devotional thought. Today's reading is from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 46. This is what the Sovereign Lord says. The east gateway of the inner courtyard will be closed during the 6 workdays each week, but it will be open on Sabbath days and the days of the new moon celebrations. The prince will enter the entry room of the gateway from the outside. Then he will stand by the gatepost while the priest offers his burnt offering and peace offering. He will bow down and worship inside the gateway passage and then go back out the way that he came. The gateway will not be closed until evening. The common people will bow down and worship the Lord in front of this gateway on Sabbath days and the days of the new moon celebrations. Each Sabbath day the prince will present to the Lord a burnt offering of 6 lambs and 1 ram, all with no defects. He will present a grain offering of a basket of choice flour to go with the ram and whatever amount of flour he chooses to go with each lamb. And he is to offer 1 gallon of olive oil for each basket of flour. At the new moon celebrations, he will bring 1 young bull, 6 lambs, and 1 ram, all with no defects. With the young bull, he must bring a basket of choice flour for the grain offering. With the ram, he must bring another basket of flour, and with each lamb, he is to bring whatever amount of flour he chooses to give. With each basket of flour, he must offer 1 gallon of olive oil. The prince must enter the gateway through the entry room, and he must leave the same way. But when the people come in through the north gateway to worship the Lord during the religious festivals, they must leave by the south gateway, and those who enter through the south gateway must leave by the north gateway. They must never leave by the same gateway they come in, but must always use the opposite gateway. The prince will enter and leave with the people on these occasions. So, at the special feasts and sacred festivals, the grain offering will be a basket of choice flour with each young bull, another basket of flour with each young ram, and as much flour as the worshiper chooses to give each lamb. Give 1 gallon of olive oil with each basket of flour. When the prince offers a voluntary burnt offering or peace offering to the Lord, the east gateway to the inner courtyard will be open for him, and he will offer his sacrifices as he does on Sabbath days. Then he will leave, and the gateway will be shut behind him. Each morning you must sacrifice a 1-year-old lamb with no defects as a burnt offering to the Lord. With the lamb, a grain offering must also be given to the Lord, about 3 quarts of flour with 1/3 of a gallon of olive oil to moisten the choice flour. This will be a permanent law for you. The lamb, the grain offering, and the olive oil must be given as a daily sacrifice every morning without fail. This is what the Sovereign Lord says. If the prince gives a gift of land to one of his sons as an inheritance, it will belong to him and his descendants forever. But if the prince gives a gift of land from his inheritance to one of his servants, the servant may keep it only until the year of Jubilee, which comes every 50th year. At that time the land will return to the prince. But when the prince gives gifts to his sons, those gifts will be permanent. And the prince may never take anyone's property by force. If he gives property to his sons, it must be from his own land, for I do not want any of my people unjustly evicted from their property. In my vision, the man brought me through the entrance besides the gateway and led me to the sacred rooms assigned to the priests, which face towards the north. He showed me at the extreme west end of these rooms, he explained, this is where the priests will cook the meat from the guilt offerings and sin offerings and bake the flour from the grain offerings into bread. They will do it here to avoid carrying the sacrifices through the outer court and endangering the people by transmitting holiness to them. Then he brought me back to the outer courtyard and led me to each of its 4 corners. In each I saw an enclosure. Each of these enclosures was 70 feet long and 52.5 feet wide, surrounded by walls. Along the inside of these walls was a ledge of stone with fireplaces under the ledge all the way around. Then the man said to me, these are the kitchens to be used by the temple assistants to boil the sacrifices offered by the people. One thought. Ezekiel continues doling out regulations concerning restored feasts, the management of royal lands, and the use of temple kitchens for the preparation of sacrifices. The passage spends a lot of time focusing on the restoration of the sacred feasts and festivals. Now, within ancient Israel, God has God had established a pattern of feasting and fasting as a spiritual rhythm for the people. The times of fasting helped the people put all their dependence on the Lord and trust in Him. It was also a way of expressing sorrow over sin. The feasts, on the other hand, were opportunities for the people to recount the marvelous works of the Lord and celebrate God's faithfulness. Within Israel, there were three festivals, or three kind of main festivals. I don't know if they're necessarily the main ones, but three very prominent ones that come up again and again, and they also show up in the New Testament in various ways. So, let's talk about those. Number one is Passover. There was the Passover festival, and that is still celebrated by Jews today. Passover commemorates when the angel of death passed over the houses of Israel when they were enslaved in Egypt. The destruction wrought by the angel of death led directly to the Exodus when the people were freed from slavery. So Passover, in a very real way, is a celebration of freedom. Then there was the Feast of Weeks, or also sometimes known as the Feast of Pentecost, and it was associated with the harvest, and it later in Jewish tradition became associated with the giving of the law on Mount Sinai. But the essence of this feast, because it was connected to the harvest, was thanking God for His provision and offering to the Lord as an expression of faith, the first fruits from the harvest. And so, in other words, you're giving your best to God as a way of both thanking Him and also as a way of saying, we're trusting you to provide for all of our needs. Third, there was the Feast of Booths. The Feast of Booths was a festival where people would actually live in booths, or more like makeshift tents, or in chapter Ezekiel 45, in this translation, it calls it the Feast of Shelters. They would make these makeshift tents and live in them, and it reminded the people of how their ancestors lived in tents when they were journeying through the wilderness. So it was a way of recalling God's faithfulness and work among the people as they made this journey to the Promised Land. Now, there was also many other festivals within Israel, but these are some of the most prominent ones, and we see them coming up in the New Testament as well. And so for us as Christians today, we can see how Jesus actually fulfilled these feasts on our behalf. First of all, Jesus was the true Passover lamb. He was sacrificed and slain. His blood was smeared over our lives so that we might not receive the penalty of death. If you remember the Exodus story, the blood of a lamb was smeared on the outside of the doorposts for the people of Israel so the angel of death would not enter those homes, and Jesus' blood is, in a sense, smeared over our lives so we would escape the death that we deserve in hell. We also see that Jesus poured out His Spirit on the church on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. And so this demonstrates that the new harvest is not one of crops, but of people receiving the gospel and being brought into the people of God. And we also find that Jesus is now our true shelter, or our true booth, as we sojourn as exiles and strangers to the heavenly kingdom. In all these ways, the feasts of Israel point us to Jesus Christ.